powering through this last panel before I guess we're going to some motorsports facility for networking after this, which I'm really looking forward to. Anyways, my name is Rumi Morales, and I'm a partner at Outlier Ventures. And we have been investing in the blockchain space for around 5 years now. Admittedly, I just recently joined Outlier in the summer, but I used to head up the venture arm of the CA group, where we likewise invested in blockchain technologies. We're one of the very first institutions actively involved in this space. I wanted to be able to introduce my co-panelists on stage. Jason, Mikhail, if you want to take a couple minutes to introduce yourself.
All right, hello everyone. I'm Jason from Korea. We're sponsored by Tongbloc. Tongbloc is actually R&D company. We start our company about 3 years ago. But actually our CEO, Jing started blockchain study in early 2000. And we start with coin developing, white paper writing, all the way up to exchange listing. So practically we did everything in blockchain development. So while we were doing R&D center, we had a need for mining center. So we did the mining center in Korea. And I know the electricity problem, so it went down a little bit. So with enough coin generated, we went into the exchange business. So Korea Crypto Exchange was built. So we were the first company in Korea had everything, R&D, mining center, and exchange. But starting of early 2000, Mr. Lee, Jing Lee, was talking about data is really important. So then we walked into this new technology, blockchain, and we carry on with the data mining instead of the crypto mining. So cryptocurrency is really important for you guys because it's all about money. But next phase about this blockchain has got to be data trading. So we will talk about data trading a little bit later. But in Korea, not only Korea, because of the Tongbloc direction, we expand our business into Europe and also Asia. So I'm part of GBF, which is Global Blockchain Foundation, and which is led by Tongbloc again. That is foundation, which is related to the government and corporate and institution. So we are building the institution where we can develop at least 1,000 engineers per year. So blockchain for us is we need to make it expandable, transparent, and usable. I guess today we will talk about that utilization just a little bit more.
Hi everyone, my name is Mikhail Gurevich. Thanks for having us here. Thanks Amir. Thanks Rumi. So I started Dominion Capital in 2011, 7-something years ago, primarily focusing on capital markets, so trading equities and bonds. And since then we've expanded into a number of other asset classes, including real estate. We own 4 hotels in New York now. We do a lot of hard money lending all across the United States. We developed in Puerto Rico, which is quite interesting, especially with all the blockchain and crypto stuff that's going on there. We're pretty heavy in structured products, primarily working with public companies, helping them acquire other companies, M&A, debt restructuring, roll-ups, that type of stuff. And venture capital. So I'm actually an engineer by background, started the first company in 2005. We were in the first class of Y Combinator and also their first exit a long time ago now. So still pretty involved with venture capital, do some venture-style investments. And then about a year and a half ago, we started getting into blockchain technologies, participating in a lot of ICOs as investors. And what was really interesting is a number of companies started coming our way looking for capital, fiat capital, to fund their operations. And they would basically offer to pledge their crypto that they raised through ICO process as collateral. So the natural evolution of our business as as lenders in the capital markets was to first to create a fund and a lending against blockchain assets, which turned into an idea to create a platform where any business can come on the platform and borrow fiat money secured by or collateralized by either Bitcoin, Ethereum, or anything else liquid. So for now, we're doing just the Bitcoin and Ethereum, but eventually the way we see that as business evolve is you should be able to borrow against any liquid asset that's on the blockchain. So I think it could be an interesting evolution from that point of view. But we're investors first and foremost, and entrepreneurs ourselves. So it's always interesting to see how new technologies evolve and revolutionize the world. And we're talking about before, and there's very interesting associations between blockchain and crypto. But I think what we want to do is disassociate that a little bit and focus on the real world applications of blockchain in the industry.
Right, yeah, so what we're going to do, if it's okay with you all, we'll have a discussion up here, assuming a good level of knowledge about blockchain, but if we start to use terms that you're unsure of, feel free to raise your hand, or afterwards, and I'm going to stick around, certainly feel free to come up and ask questions if you don't feel as confident asking them publicly, but we'll also make sure that we do have Q&A after this discussion here. What I wanted to start off with was, on your point, about real world stuff. There's a lot of promises that have been made around blockchain, right, for the past 5 years. A lot of applications where it could be seen more hype than real. So that's a question. Mikhail, I want to start with you. So what have been the best real things that you've seen, blockchain specifically related, in the past couple of years or a few years that you've been involved in this space?
Yeah, that's a good question. So other than Bitcoin and Ethereum, just a question for the crowd. Can anyone give me one example of blockchain being used publicly that someone is using right now?
This is the music industry for back-to-the-basic ownership, or like Spotify and Pandora, that's how they're paying artists.
What's the name of the token?
Spotify.
Yeah, but there are some recording artists, some of them have been working on this for a while. I mean, there are other things like diamonds on a blockchain or sneakers on a blockchain, but I guess you're trying to say in terms
Well,
of
the point is, right.
complete universal ubiquity.
Yeah, for sure.
No, there's definitely,
IPFS storage.
well,
Yeah,
that's so popular in usage that you could just name it.
Yeah,
It just
no.
doesn't. The point is, right, there's a lot of promises that have been made, and the technology is definitely very nascent. But what I have seen is the applications of blockchain in the private space, specifically in supply chain management. So I know, a number of big shipping companies are using it. Maersk, for example. A friend of mine is a third generation farmer. He doesn't farm anymore; he just sits in the office. But he still calls himself a farmer. And they're actually integrating their supply chain management with ShopRite network, right, using blockchain. So that's a really cool, I think, application of blockchain. Obviously it doesn't really yield to speculation for external investments, but it is an application with real kind of purpose. So from that point of view, I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, let me add it up just a little bit. Just the reason Mikhail's question was, are we using it or not, is because we're confusing between cryptocurrency and blockchain. Because cryptocurrency is behind the blockchain right now because all the blockchain companies doing ICO. By doing ICO, they're creating token. The creating token is supposed to be listed to be utilized. To utilize, you have to use it in the market and use it as a money, and all the rewards are supposed to happen, which is not happening yet. But the question was a little bit wrong because we've been doing this blockchain development for less than 3 years right now. So it is too early to say that we can see it right away. But end of this year, you will see a whole lot of blockchain project coming into the market. First one will be the payment method. Second one will be the information exchange. And the last one will be our project, data exchange. So, it's upcoming. And if someone say, oh yeah, I saw blockchain usage already, which is questionable. Because blockchain itself is still a question mark right there. Throughout the whole process of your business, blockchain is not right. There's a certain area blockchain is very suitable, and certain area is centralized is really suitable. So I think next question we'll just continue with this. So decentralizing and centralizing. So we haven't done any perfect decentralizing yet. And Tongbloc is working very hard to make it happen right now.
Yeah, I think the other problem is that we're talking about private blockchains.
Mm-hmm.
It's not very sexy because how the hell do we make money on it, right? So Bitcoin, Ethereum, I get it, there's speculation and ICOs and everything. There's an opportunity to make money, but once you kind of take that away, all of a sudden you lose interest. So I think that's why there's also been kind of that type of shift.
Okay. And
Can I unspool this a little bit just to make sure that we somewhat agree on what's being said about here on stage? Obviously, the first, let's call it blockchain, but what's interesting even about Satoshi Nakamoto's paper that he wrote and published almost 10 years ago is he actually doesn't use the word blockchain anywhere in there. But when blockchain started to develop, you can say that the Bitcoin blockchain was the first, right? And then you started to have variations of that, whether that was Ethereum, right, or Ripple with its own distributed ledger technology and so on and so forth. So there's been an evolution over this over time. I think we're using blockchain as a generic catch-all, but when we talk, for example, of something only been in 3 years of development, we're talking about different specific use cases that people are trying to apply this ledger technology towards. And on this point about decentralization versus centralization, one of the most important, supposedly important use cases or great attributes about the blockchain is that it is decentralized, that there's no central authority in charge of any of the data that's being shared on this. All the data is known to everyone. But the question is that actually the best thing? And how do we achieve decentralization? You can look at Ethereum, for example. Even the SEC has recently come out and said, oh, it's decentralized now. But I think we all know that with personalities like Joe Lubin or Vitalik Buterin, is like, is it truly decentralized yet? So it's still very much an evolving process. So a question for you then, Mikhail, because you mentioned that you had been investing in other things. So what was the trigger that got you into investing in blockchain? Was it your customers coming to you? Or was there an aha moment? Or as an investor, like, were you skeptical, or what was it that thought, okay, I want to take the money into this space?
So I had this company come to us about 1.5 years ago. They created this model where they can predict certain outcomes based on game theory and kind of wisdom of crowds. And this was 1.5 years ago, so like right before the ICOs became a popular way of raising capital. And so they ran me through their model, which made no sense whatsoever. And then they explained how they're going to raise money with the ICO, and I asked, why would anyone buy this? It's not selling equity. What is the point? And their answer was speculation. And at that point, I kind of lost it. That was incredible. I said, no way, you guys will never be able to raise money, zero chance. 3 months later, they raised $50 million. Bananas. So obviously, we all know how that turned out. They did a token offering at, I remember it was things like 10 cents or something, and obviously now it's trading at below, US dollar below 10. But the way I was looking at kind of what they were doing is just like we would approach any venture capital investment or any really investment. You look at the people that are running it, the team, you look at the model, does it make sense, and what does the kind of revenue profile look like, and none of it made sense, and it was pure speculation, right? But that got kind of my gears turning, and we started talking to a lot of other people in the space, and clearly there was something going on, right? So at that point we said, listen, we're capitalists, so if there's money to be made, let's do it, and kind of logic aside. So, but what was interesting is the progression from kind of, first you could make money in participating in ICOs. And everything was very, very accelerated. If we compare the time frame of kind of the ICO bubble to the time frame of the dot-com bubble, where that played out over, say, like 2 years, like 3 years, the ICO bubble played out in like 6 months. So then you had to participate in the pre-sale to make money. After that, you had to participate in like private pre-sale to make money. And then the last iteration of that was participating in the equity sale where you get tokens for free. But there's no like substance and real assets behind that. So we got out of the game because as much as I was making money, there's also kind of certain ethical, you want to be a little bit kind of, you want to draw the line somewhere, right? And we got out of the ICO investment game, I would say, at the end of last year. Kind of wanted to see how the whole thing plays out. And now the popular, what's I think is just starting is the emergence of the security token offering, right? And that's going to be very interesting to play out. And we're actually, so the lending company that I mentioned, so we just completed a Series A, we're about to put the credit line in place. And we're also considering doing a security token offering. But what we are seeing after doing a lot of research, talking to everyone in the space, is that fundamentally there's a problem with these things, and that's the 2,000 people investor limit, right? So if you eclipse that number, you become a public company. There's the law in the United States, right? So how do you eclipse that? And it defeats the whole purpose of doing a security token offering. That the beauty of a blockchain is that so many people can participate and make the transactions a lot more efficient. But fundamentally, you're trying to be a public company, but using private exemptions. So that is something that we still haven't figured out, and I would be very, very interested in seeing how the community solves that question.
Right. The evolution of investments in this space has been so rapid, shockingly so. It was just back in the good old days, the halcyon days of 2015, when I was investing in companies like Ripple through equity. We had equity investment in Ripple, right? And digital asset, digital currency group. Those are just some of the companies that we invested in. And very soon enough, it's like, I remember being on stage and I was old-fashioned because I wasn't looking at ICOs, right, or these initial coin offerings. And then now, like, those ICO people are already out of fashion because you're supposed to be doing security tokens offerings. And meanwhile, there's still traditional equity investors like me. It's like, hey, I think this model worked and it still continues to exist. So we can get into details a little bit later on, but it's up to you really if you're looking to invest in the space on what type of instruments you would like to invest in and how, whether it's direct equity or tokens or securities tokens or through a fund. There are a lot of options here actually for an investor. I think is pretty cool. But why don't you talk, Jason, a little bit about Tongbloc role in the blockchain space, because I think it's interesting. You have a company here that has a very, very wide view of the applications of blockchain.
Like I said earlier, we start with R&D, so we understand the blockchain importance. But the funny thing is, all the demands on the market was asking us how to run the ICO, how to list it on the exchange, which was all wrong question for us, because our blockchain and cryptocurrency was separate. Because with the blockchain, what we were trying to say was decentralizing everything and give the public the ownership again. The meaning is, if some data is out there, like Google or Apple, they're collecting so much data without your consent. I mean, with your consent that you didn't even know that you consented. So they're making multi-million dollars. But why can't we give this money back to the public? If you create one data or 3 data, make sure that you own it and you use it and you knew where that's gonna go. So we're trying to make a platform. So Tongbloc is not trying to make any profit out of this platform. This platform is just for the public. So when the public collect the data, and consumer could be the companies or institution or research center, they're collecting all the data out there. So we're making this data farm, data market out there, so that public can choose who can use my data and get rewarded. So by doing that, there's many data companies out there, but they are holding their public data on their server, which is not right for the future. Because holding in the center costs money. So they need to make somehow money to run the business. The Tongbloc new DTOP, which is data transaction on-demand platform, is about public. So why are we doing this without making money? Because data is really important in the future. By controlling this data, first one will be the historic data, which is accumulating day by day. Second is the sensor data, real-time data, that you will get it through the device. Last one is plan data, which is we are focusing on really much, because you don't know what kind of data you need or what kind of data you need to collect, so we plan it for you. So this data is needed, and you looked at it, oh, I got that, then you can collect it and get rewarded. Then who's gonna take it? Company will pay for it and take it from you guys. So by creating this decentralized market form out there, the Tongbloc is looking for all the ownership of public. So each one of you are thinking that before I go back to the investment part. Equity investment and token investment. So of course, DTOP is also creating token because he has to run with some sort of data. But yet, are you going to purchase token to run the data farm? Or are you going to purchase our share as an equity share to see the future of blockchain? You must decide. Are you going into cryptocurrency or are you going into blockchain? Again, are you going to purchase the coin or are you going to purchase some share of this promising company. Now, what I'm showing right now is because not only Korea, but we are collecting all different countries, all different data. For instance, today, how many coffee have you drank? Those data is like useless for us, individual, but for somebody it's very, very important. So Tongbloc will link those important connections, public to the company, without getting any fee from you guys. So by doing that, we will take money when we plan things. So when we work, we get rewarded also. So everything is equal. Public, company, us is equal. In future, you might need some data. So you might ask our data platform saying that, oh, I want to know this type of data, then our mechanism, algorithm will find the right data and the right track to connect you guys. So peer-to-peer data transaction will happen. Peer-to-peer coin transaction will happen. How is that possible? Because Tongbloc has been working with at least 60 companies right now. So asset token, utility token, payment token, you name it, we know it. So for these 3 years, we've been looking at this crypto and blockchain business. This is time to show people it's workable. With what? With the public usage. To do that, we must get invitation of all the individuals into data farm, which is not that hard because you don't even feel it. With one device on your computer, your data is sucking in. But not to Google, not to Apple, but to yourself. So your own data farm will contain data and it will reward you with the money.
And I believe you have on the tables in front of you some schematic representations of this. I think what Jason is talking about, though, is incredibly important as you think about where blockchain is going or what the best use cases for it are. You know, Bitcoin came out as a peer-to-peer payment system, really. But how many of you, we're talking about coffee, how many of you, forever how many cups you drank today, paid for that in Bitcoin, right? Where I think a number of us are starting to see the values for blockchain is not necessarily in systems where things are naturally centralized. For example, a central bank, I think for the foreseeable future, will sit in the middle of the financial system, but in use cases that are more naturally decentralized. Data ownership as an individual or even by a machine, as you think of Internet of Things as your focus on as well. Machine-to-machine transmissions of data. That transmission layer, being a blockchain layer, can also transfer any stored value. Data is a stored value. It has information that's important to somebody. Bitcoin is a stored value, a dollar is a stored value, right? So it's really interesting to think about the use cases for blockchain in systems that are naturally more decentralized. Then I think some of the initial use cases that were all focused on the financial services industry. So you had mentioned, Mikhail, you had mentioned like supply chain and some other things like that. Can you talk about additional industries where blockchains can have a big important role to play?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way I'm looking at this, right? There's always, you need to have supply and demand, right? You need to have the balance of two. So if someone's issuing tokens, someone is creating supply, there needs to be demand. Otherwise, there's an imbalance in the network, right? So all of the ICO, I don't know what your experience has been, but there needs to be a demand for this stuff, right? There's demand for Bitcoin for a variety of reasons, but then a lot of other kind of ICO tokens have been issued. There has been significant lack of demand because you only have supply of investors coming in at cost basis that's like 90% lower than where they're doing ICOs. So I think that's why we've seen big, not even a pushback, but I think a lot of issuers, and I would call them issuers of tokens, have sort of almost sullied the image of blockchain, unfortunately, because of that. But to answer your question, and I was just thinking about it actually yesterday when you sent out sort of the agenda, like what would be cool applications. So we looked at a couple of companies about 2 years ago when cannabis started to become legal in certain states. One was BioTrax, and I forget the other company name, but in the United States, you have to keep a record from seed to sale, right? And if I wasn't doing Dominion, I would probably create some kind of company and using blockchain to be able to track cannabis from seed to sale. I think that's a very cool application, right? In this respect, because it's very important. I mean, the government mandates that you have to have the transaction history of all these things. So I think that's a cool maybe example of an application of blockchain specifically used for its intended purposes, right? It's to be able to verify those transactions.
Right, I think agribusiness definitely is an important area. I think there was even an article in the New York Times either yesterday or the day before about Walmart now exploring this, with some of the dangers, trying to track E. coli, for example, and lettuce, again, from the grower to the point of sale. One of the areas that we like to look into in Outlier Ventures is, I mentioned machine-to-machine, so here's another just use case for you. And after I talk about this, we'll open it up for questions. But for example, we all talk about, we assume it's a given, the driverless car, right? The self-driving car. Well, let's say that this car drives itself to an electric charging pad, gets its electricity and drives away. How does that happen? What is the communication? What is the transmission? What is the transaction that makes that happen? Somehow this car gets its electricity, somehow it pays for that, and somehow the electricity markets recognize that and adjust for it. This is actually, at least for me, where blockchain technology has a fundamental role to enable. And it's that type of experimentation that I at least personally get really excited about. So there are different applications here, obviously, things that can be real, some things that are in development, whether it's on music. Obviously the Bitcoin, I think, is a proven use case for the blockchain. But it's obviously a large territory and still nascent after all these years, 5 years, 5 to 10 years. So with that, are there questions from the audience? Yeah.
So when's is your KCX exchange live in Korea?
Actually, we were gonna do that in April, but then the Korean government saying that fiat currency is not allowed, so we switched to coin. So this month you will see it.
Awesome. All right, very cool. And then the second question is how you think Maersk and IBM are going to scale with their private blockchain with Hyperledger. Do you see that as there was a Maersk, I think, response, and if they're using Hyperledger Fabric. Do you have any viewpoint on how private permission blockchains scale versus public permissionless blockchains?
I think there needs to be a reason for, I was talking about supply and demand, right? If in a private network, who's going to be doing the mining or just the verification of the...
I think IBM, the way Maersk works is that IBM charges $1,000 per node per month. Technically, if the nodes collude, so I don't know who is going to be in a Maersk network or is in Maersk network, but if there was some cataclysmic issue, they could all change the data in theory. But I'm kind of curious, because I believe in private chains as well. It's just longer term, I'm kind of wondering how they're going to scale with the cost structure. It's like centralized software, effectively. So they have to pay somebody instead of doing the community. Like Ethereum has no expenses. Yeah, there's Joe Lubin consensus and people supporting it, but technically, there's no operating expenses to scale. The network scale, people use it, Solidity, people learn it, people need new code for their projects. It's like Linux or PHP, right? People just add to the code base, right? IBM, they have to keep adding to the code base, right? They gotta pay people directly from IBM. So, I don't know, that's kind of my rhetorical question on all this stuff.
Well, they're really nice guys, that's what they do.
I don't know, we don't know.
I think it's almost a fundamentally philosophical question of how this industry is gonna, or how blockchain shall revolutionize the world. Will it be through open source protocols like the Bitcoin blockchain, Ethereum, that everyone just assumes that we will adopt? Or will it be institutions in consortia, and that's the way that you gain the broader network adoption?
Maybe
so
faster.
This notion of a token, I think, is fundamentally important to a lot of startups who felt like, well, by having a token, and this is where at least I feel it's very, very hard to divorce blockchain from crypto, because that's the incentive mechanism for someone to use a protocol, right?
Right.
But if you don't, if those markets disappear, or if they're struggling, like we're seeing right now in the bear market, then who gets the advantage? It's the guys who still have the money. It's the large institutions and their other buddies amongst large institutions, all deciding that they want to use a certain system, and then that system wins out.
Awesome. Yeah, that's true.
So, Jason, if you don't mind, maybe comment a little bit about when you look at someone like Facebook today. to your point, they're gathering your data, they see the clothes you're clicking on, you know, the restaurants you're going to, and they're selling that to advertisers, and obviously that model is gonna turn around in the blockchain world that you described. Do you see brands starting to compete for people's information? So, you know, take a particular vertical like cars now, so if someone new, I like Ferrari, how's that gonna impact Maserati, for example? Are they gonna compete for my data? And do you care commenting a little bit about that? What
And in a way, the data range is important because if we think about the full data, whether your name, your social security number, or all this important KYC, then the data is too sacred. But yet, when we cut down the very, very important part out, only gender, age, and go out with your activity. So what we do is with a device or any type of action you make out there, we try to collect those data. So in a way, it's not conflict any privacy issue. So all the data that people are creating is sucked by Facebook or something like that. But in a way, somebody mentioned earlier, if we decentralize everything and put all the data into public, there will be problematic. My question is why? It's because the data stored in personal level is secured by person, meaning as responsibility is going down to the personal level, not the corporate level. Why are we giving our data to the big corporate? Because we trust them, right? So Bitcoin white paper is also saying that trust third party is disappearing. That's the blockchain 101. How can we do that? Data out there supposed to be shared by others, but controlled by that person. That's what it is. Authorizing my data to be used. So like saying, buying red Ferrari in your age, in your reason, will help somebody. But we really don't want to know your social security number or other details. So what we're talking about is, one is marketing usage, second is institution usage, and study usage. So I briefly talked about the historical data, which is accumulation. So your bank statement or your health record is all historical, right? But the real-time one is actually, if we put some sensor out there, we can count people. We kind of make fun of like wristband that we give away. The wristband will detect some of the sensing device around you and create data. So when you, person, move around and make some data, and it creates value. And that value must pay back to you, not others. I think that's what it is.
Are there other questions? If not, yeah, go ahead.
Well, you know, obviously you're going to incentivize the public for selling their data. They have a choice of who they want to sell it to. But so would that lower the cost of the company to collect the data, to actually purchase the data?
The funny thing is, company will, reduce a whole lot of money. Because this is going to be tokenized again. So the token data-to-data transaction, for instance, in Korea, recently, a week ago, Misoli was offered about 300K for certain data. Through our platform in the future, 1/10 of that price will be used. So company-wise, they are reducing cost. Public-wise, they didn't know before, but they get paid. That's the beauty of this blockchain, I guess.
So I think we just have like maybe a couple minutes left. I'm just going to ask famous last words from our panelists on stage. What is going to be the most impactful use case or use of blockchain in 5 years? You come back in the future in 5 years' time. Where has blockchain impacted our society?
No, I think it's going to be on a level that we don't really see. And I'll give you an example. I took an Uber in the morning to the airport in New York, and the driver pulled up Waze application to navigate. And all of the processing to calculate the most optimal route from my house to the airport took place in the cloud. Now, 10 years ago, we were just thinking about the cloud as a sort of this concept, and we didn't know how it would be applicable in our everyday life. And I think it's good, but now we use it all the time. Just don't think about it, right? So I think it's going to be very similar, 5-10 years from now, where there's going to be calculations happening on blockchain all the time, and we're just not going to think about it.
I mean, earlier, we just talked about the exponential thoughts. Okay, so we don't know how far it will go. We cannot limit ourselves with the blockchain. Because my best guess in 5 years, without knowing, we will use it. Without knowing, will we feel comfortable by using it? By using it means you don't even know what it is, but it is blockchain. The people behind you, engineers, company like Tongbloc, and many others around the world, will work really hard for you guys to use the blockchain. But the thing is, let's go back. Do you really know how your credit card works? No, but we are using it. Okay, when we change the flip phone to Android or iOS, do you even know how the screen tapping is working? We didn't even have to know, but we are using it. Why? Because it's convenient. Because it's easier and better. The blockchain will do that. So decentralizing, not the whole thing, but at the end of customer-based, client-based, consumer-based level, we will see it. And 5 years from now, please call me.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mikhail and Jason. Thank you to all of you for listening to our